Hey guys, it's Super User Stan here and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've got 3 different mice that I've been checking out and trying to select from in my journey to find my new mouse. On the left here, I've got the Corsair Dark Core RGB Pro SE mouse. In the middle, in the middle, this is the Naga Pro from Razer. And then on the right, or my right, your left, is the Logitech G604. And all of them have actually some similarities here, and I'll talk about why I've kind of narrowed it down to these 3 mice. Just to preface this, these are my considerations and my personal opinions. Clearly, you're going to have your preferences as well. You may play different games, and you have different types, of hand sizes, and just whatever's comfortable for you. So, these are just some things to consider when selecting, looking at these 3 mice. So, just for your convenience, I'll make sure to put the timestamp down below, just in case you want to skip something. And everything, all the links for these mice are also in the links below. Now, before we begin, just a little history here. I've been using the Logitech MX Master for a long time for productivity, even for gaming really, even though it's not a gaming mouse. It's really comfortable, but just it doesn't have enough buttons. So I kind of went through my closet here and dug out a older mouse that I've got. This is the Logitech G700. It's got 4 buttons on the side and 3 buttons up top. So it gives you a little bit more buttons. And that's kind of what I've been looking for, is just a handful of buttons, not too many actually, just 3 or 4 buttons to be able to keep my most useful abilities. So that's where I came up with looking at the G604, because the G604 is kind of a evolution of the G700 with the 4 buttons and then the couple on top. And the G600 or 602, the form factor, you've got 6 buttons on the left, 2 buttons on top, and you've got the hyper scroll wheel, or no, it's not called the hyper scroll wheel. It's the infinite scroll wheel. I'm actually not sure what this one's called, but it's a little different from the Logitech MX3, but it's got the continuous scroll wheel button. All 3 of these mice are wireless mice, and it's got, all of them have the low latency, less than 1 millisecond low latency at 22.4 gigahertz, so that's great. And this mouse specifically here has the ability to use both Bluetooth and wireless by just the touch of a button. In terms of feel for me, I think it feels pretty good in the hand. And the buttons are placed in, the thumb buttons are placed in a good way where you can reach the forward 2 and the back 2 without shifting your hand. And of course the middle isn't a problem either. And with only 6 buttons, it's really good for understanding where each button is and being able to hit exactly what you want when you need it. You don't really want to fat finger these thumb buttons at any time, and it's really hard to do so. So that's a good thing. However, I think my biggest gripe for me is I kind of want a wider or larger mouse, because, I think it's important to tell you guys is that I tend to palm my mouse. If you use the other 2 grip styles, using your fingertips or half, just that's probably fine. But if you're palming this mouse, this is just not big enough, to be honest, because my index finger and my pinky finger kind of drag on the table. And even though it's comfortable and it is good in the palm of your hand, or the feel is good in the palm of your hand, I feel like half of the mouse, or half of the mouse is missing half of something for my rest of the hand on the right side. So that's kind of why it is disqualified from my consideration. In terms of weight, I think this is actually the lightest one, coming in at 135 grams, I think it says. On the software front, G-Hub is the software to use. You can configure all your buttons, you can remap all your buttons, that works. And being that this doesn't have RGB, you know, RGB isn't a thing in the software to be able to control this, so that's not much of a talking point. So, you know, the software works as intended. This one is just a very simple Logitech dongle with a AA battery from the back compartment. There's no way to recharge it. It does not have any way to plug it in. There is no cable. So that's an interesting consideration. You have to physically swap out batteries, which you know, while you're gaming, you really don't want to deal with charging. You kind of just, if you need to swap out a battery, you can swap out a battery. That's probably not a too bad of a design, honestly. So that's kind of my thoughts on the G604. Next up, this is the Corsair Dark Core RGB Pro SE. What is such a long name? This mouse came out, I want to say about a year ago here, early 2020, and it kind of flew under the radar for me because I didn't know about this existence until earlier this week when I picked it up. Now, this mouse has 2 buttons, forward, backward button, and 2 buttons up top. I think these are actually by default the DPI buttons. And then the middle button, I'm sure this is probably like a profile switching button by default, but those could be remapped in IQ, not an issue. So really you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons, and mapped to whatever game, you know, is pretty good. Now this mouse is a heavy mouse. This mouse comes in at 5 ounces. We could do the conversion to grams if I can't do it off the top of my head here, but 5 ounces versus this was 4 ounces, and the Naga is about 4.1. So this is clearly going to be a much heavier mouse. Now for me, the weight isn't an issue because I don't generally lift my mouse off the table. I kind of just slide it left and right. And the comfort level of this mouse is really good. And what do I mean by that? On the left-hand side, you have a thumb rest where you can rest your thumb and your thumb never touches the table. On the right-hand side, you have a cover where you can pull off, and this is magnetically attached. And you have the optional wing for your ring finger and for your pinky, where you know, kind of just rests on that. So really, your entire hand is elevated off the table, and you kind of spread out your hand a little bit if you wanted to, and just so that you know you can move the mouse without any of your fingers touching the table. So this is really nice. Given that it is very big, very wide, you're really not going to be lifting the mouse much, and very heavy. So for at least my use scenarios, it's pretty good. Onto connectivity. Connectivity is the same. You got Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So this is 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. Connection's fine. And in fact, all 3 of these mice, the connections are fine. The sensitivity is great. It's to the point where you really can't tell that it's on wireless. And the polling rate, you know, I think it's like 1,000 hertz polling rate. It's fine. So that's not an issue. You have 3 onboard stored profiles. In fact, all of these mice have different profiles that you can swap through. And the RGB, you can see the RGB is going off crazy here, but the RGB is actually pretty vibrant and the colors are pretty good. In fact, out of these 3 mice, the Corsair's RGB is probably the most vibrant and colorful. On the software front, IQ works. It's a resource hog, but you know, it works with the rest of your peripherals. And the configurability is there, especially the RGB configurability. You got a lot of RGB options, and the way to configure macros and buttons, it all works. So that kind of sounds like this is a winner, right? Well, it is, but there is actually one bug that really bothers me, and it's the scroll wheel. For some reason, when you have this scroll wheel isn't very fast, and I think it's the software interpretation of the scroll wheel isn't very fast. So you have to go through Windows and kind of bump up the scroll speed, which isn't a problem, but then It's a weird bug where when you scroll slowly, you can scroll relatively fast. Let's say, you scroll 70% speed, you go through the document. But then if you really start yanking on the scroll wheel here or scrolling really fast, it kind of stutters where it's like the software doesn't react, or you're going so fast that the sensor's really not even picking it up, so that if you're going like at 100% speed, the document only moves at like 20% speed. So that's kind of strange. To actually scroll faster, you gotta slow down a little bit. And I don't know if it's a hardware issue or it's a firmware issue, if they can fix it. This is a relatively new mouse because it's coming out. It came out earlier last year, but then I've seen a couple other complaints on forums. It doesn't seem to have a solution just yet. I don't know. So besides that, this mouse is almost perfect. Now, let's get on to the last mouse here. This is the Naga Pro from Razer. If you've probably seen the Naga around, the Naga's been around since, I don't know, 2009, 2010. It's been around for almost a decade now. Kind of crazy, actually. The Pro is the best of the Nagas. This has 3 different side panels where you can actually swap out. And I actually had a Naga many years ago, and there was actually a couple of big issues I had with Naga. The Naga is great for MMOs. You've got all the buttons, but then issue 1 is, and this is a personal issue, is that it's just too many buttons, and it sometimes gets confusing between the second row and the third row of buttons. And the first row is fine because it's in the front, and the last row is fine because it's in the back, but then the second and third row kind of gets a little confusing. I just never built up the muscle memory, and that's kind of where my conclusion is. I don't need 12 buttons, I just need 6 buttons. The 6 buttons is plenty. So that's kind of why I picked up the Naga Pro, specifically this version, because of the interchangeable sides. You can interchange the 12 to either a 2-button version or a 6-button version. If you use the 2-button version, I'm not sure why you get a Naga. There's plenty of other mice out there that just have 2 buttons. You get a Naga because you want buttons, right? So this right here, this is the 6-button version, and it's kind of like the Logitech G604, where you have 3 on top and 3 on the bottom, and then you've got 2, which is I think this is by default DPI buttons, but you can program it to whatever you want. And then you got side scroll left and right on the scroll wheel. The Naga for me is comfortable because again, like the Dark Core Pro, this is a relatively wide mouse, and it's got a slot for you to rest your ring finger, and your pinky kind of just falls to the side here without touching the table that much. Being only 6 buttons here, this version, this is I think the best version because you can program the forward and backward button to this, while the 2-button version you're gonna have forward and backward by default. But this one, you don't have it by default, but you can program it in, and it works relatively well. The 12-button version is just very confusing, and forward button, backward, web browsing, it just doesn't work really well with the 12-button version, and that's kind of why I never jived with the original Naga. In fact, the original Naga's forward and backward buttons were up top, so that's kind of stupid. But anyway, the form factor is great, and it feels good in the hand. Again, it comes in at 4.1 ounces, so it's relatively light-ish. It's not super heavy, so that's something that this has going for it. As for conductivity, it's the same. Bluetooth is an option, and a 2.4 gigahertz wireless. You can flip a switch. The chroma, or the RGB, is bright. In fact, I think I got it turned down to like 70 or 80% because at 100% it's just too bright. For night use. With these 3 buttons, I think it makes the Naga a much more appealing mouse for me personally, and the form factor works with my hand. other little considerations. If it's got the 20K DPI sensor, very on par with the Corsair. The Corsair is like a 16K or something like that. You'll never use that high of a DPI anyway. I think my preference for DPI is like right around 1900 or 2K. So being 20K, it's totally overkill. For charging, you got a little wire in charging. You can plug that in. And also you can pick up the optional dock where you can, I think it's like the Pro charging dock. I can't remember what it's called actually, but you know, you can put it on the dock and it will charge, sold separately, which is kind of an interesting or nice little to have, but absolutely not necessary. So that's kind of the overall look and feel of the Naga Pro. Now, talking about price here, the Naga Pro is going to be the most expensive one. The Corsair Dark Pro comes in at like $70 or $80. This one comes in at $150. And this one is going to be the cheapest, like at $60 or $70. Again, links in the description below for the most up-to-date prices. But I was able to pick this up on Amazon Prime Day for $99. Clearly $50 off. Clearly discounts can be had with this mouse. And at about $100, I think it's a little bit more reasonable in price. I do realize that it's got these configurable, side panels, and it kind of is like 3 mice in one. But really, you're not going to be swapping between them. You're going to find the one that you want, and then you're gonna use it. And it is what it is. So, last little quirks about this. About the Naga is that it's got optical switches and it's supposed to be a little bit more accurate. The switch blocks a infrared beam where it detects the clicks. Honestly, it doesn't feel that much different physically. I guess it's just better for longevity and for durability, but and just as a marketing thing, marketing special feature that it's got optical switches. Lastly, for the software, Razer has Synapse 3. The software is pretty good. It works. It's got a lot of configurability options. Well, that's where you kind of go in and you can configure a lot of the advanced features like lift off distance, how high you want the laser to cut off for lift off. You can configure it down to 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters. You can have asymmetrical lift off, so you can have it deactivate at a higher height and then reactivate at a lower height. So clearly the Razer has a lot of special gamer centric features in its software. So if you want that, that's kind of what you get for going Razer. So in the end, I think the mouse of choice that I'm going to be going with is the Naga Pro with the 6 buttons on the left side, because it's easily mappable forward and backward button, and that gives me a handful of buttons, and it's light-ish and it fits well in the hand. It's big and wide, and it's very nice for the whole palm grip feel. So hopefully this helps you in your purchasing decisions. I know I was standing in front of these mice at Best Buy, and I think I spent maybe like 20 minutes on my phone just trying to do some quick research, and there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of things to think about, so just some food for thought. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, if you could smash that like button, that'd be great. And if you want to see more tech videos like this, you can always hit that subscribe button. As always, my name is Stan, and I'll see you guys in the next one.